Oh, hello, everybody. It's Deborah here, and welcome to another episode of Sphere of Being, which is all about caring for those who care for others. And today we have the most amazing guest. She is Susie Mackie. She's brilliant. I'll let her tell her story, her journey, her wonderful business, and it's going to be a delight to really get under her skin so that we can so that we can have a great chat. So Susie, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. And
Deborah, thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And so, yes, if you could tell us a little bit about you, what you're all about, and the wonderful journey you've been on, and how what you do helps people who are caring for others, whether it be clients or loved ones, etc., so that we can perhaps get a few tips from you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's been a roller coaster, as I think life often or almost always is. And the reason I do what I do is because I grew up with a very low self-worth for a number of reasons, and no boundaries as well. I was actually brought up to be obedient, both at home and at school. I went to an all-girls private school, and I was a farmer's daughter in Hampshire, just a gentleman farmer, but I mean, lovely. So, and those were the days. I think in those days, that was more the way, that you did as you were told. And I did, because I'm a gentle, nurturing, creative Piscean, and I did what I was told. I didn't rebel really at all. It's that thing of being a good girl, and nice girls don't, and all of that kind of era. And it didn't do me any good, because with no self-worth or low self-worth and no boundaries, I was pretty when I was younger, and I attracted the wrong kind of male into my life. I had 3 disastrous marriages to either very controlling or dysfunctional men. In fact, the first one was an army captain, and I promised to obey him in our wedding vows, which was a big mistake. And my father helped me leave that marriage after just 1 year. So years went on, and I realized that if anything in my life was going to change, first of all, it had to be me. I had to look at the pattern. I had to look at what was happening and why it was happening. And I had to do the work to make sure that that kind of relationship and my kind of being stopped, and a new me came about. Not without some work, not without some pain. I didn't actually have therapy as such. I read, I had a lot of good mentors. I had a business coach who was a great mentor, very wise, and explained a lot of things to me. And so that was 2013. And that was when it all started to shift. And I think one of the reasons now I'm in such a good place. And I think one of the things that I love to help people with, and one of the reasons that I'm not afraid of telling my age, I've just become an old age pensioner, I'm 66, is that it's never too late. Never too late to try something new, get yourself out there, change your life if you need to, and then experience life to the full. And that's what I love to do, to help people, is thrive, not just survive, but thrive. And so there's various ways that I do that, Deborah.
Well, this is very interesting, Susie, because you hit upon something that I know I have been there on my journey, which is the voice that I know that I want to give to people. One, it's not too late, but one always has inside us the opportunity to change. And it can be frightening, because we're discovering a new us. Mm-hmm. And that newness can be quite challenging in a way. But I'd be interested to hear, there must have been numerous years in which you were in a conditioned pattern. What was the catalyst? If there was one or maybe a couple of things that made you think, if I continue in the same way, there and not going to be any different results. What was it, if you can bring to the listeners that was the spark maybe that ignited this idea of change and wanting to pursue that?
Mm. I know exactly. What I would say is that more than a challenge for me changing, because it was a choice that I made, and it was a good choice, was that it was a challenge to some of the other people then being around somebody who was changing and who was becoming strong and who wouldn't take any nonsense anymore.
Mm.
And that was challenging for them.
Mm.
My pain point, my low point, was when I was with my third husband. It had already got very difficult. He had become an alcoholic. He was a heavy drinker, but I thought when he was with me, he wouldn't need to drink so much. And he had anger issues with his mother and all of that sort of thing. So he became an alcoholic and out of control. And I was doing a wedding. I was a wedding photographer at the time. And of course, when you have a job like that, you are contracted to do the day that you said you would do, and you need to be there and deliver. And it's a big focus, it's a big responsibility, but I loved it because actually I'm very romantic as well. And I love people, and it was always a complete joy. And I had a phone call. It was either a phone call or a text. I think it was a call because she was really upset, from my younger daughter, who must have been 16 at the time. Mummy, can you come home? And I said, well, I'm so sorry, darling. It was probably late afternoon. I said, I can't. I've got to finish doing this wedding. And my husband had really scared her, really frightened her. And I felt so guilty and so torn and so desperately wanted to leave and go to her. And I just felt incredibly guilty. And so, I mean, we had been happy, and there had been a time when she had said to him, I wish you were my father. But then this drink got completely in the way. It's very sad. And so that guilt, what am I doing? And so when I got home later that night, I went to her and comforted her. And then I gently confronted him the next morning. How was last night? Was there anything that you'd like to tell me? No, no, no. And I said, well, what about this? And I told him, that was it, that B and I were going to be leaving, and he exploded. But that was it. That was it. We were going, and we went, because I couldn't have that happening.
And this is very interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, alcoholism is a disease. It's a very destructive, very isolating disease. And often when people are in the grips of alcohol, they don't remember, they can't recall the things that they said and that they did, or the whole issue with that. And I've spent time within Al-Anon, which are the support group for Alcoholics Anonymous. And it is unfortunately a classic situation within people who care for and who are in the proximity of people with the disease of alcoholism. But interestingly enough, it was that catalyst that you're saying that was from your daughter, the fact that you made a very courageous decision to get and remove yourself and your daughter from a situation, presumably not knowing what that outcome would entail at that time.
Oh, where I'd go.
Yeah, exactly. With that in mind, how did you cope? How did you push through this period of the unknown? Because the unknown, in many cases, for people embarking on this, stepping into their power journey, being 100% for themselves so they can care for others, there is a level of being in the unknown, which is a fearful place in many regards to be. How did you draw your strength? What came to you in those moments so that you could carry on and fulfill what you needed to do?
I do have an inner strength. Whilst I may be gentle and nurturing, I have a resilience because I've been a born optimist. So I have that innate positivity, if you like. I was also blessed with a wonderful, I love people. And so I have great friends. And in the wedding industry, you know, you work at venues a number of times, and there are some florists, a lovely couple, two guys, and they were a gorgeous couple, and you know, they were together. So very nurturing and very kind. And they I went to them and they helped me. They said, you need a sanctuary. And so they were living in a cottage which belonged to Lord Bathurst of the Eastnor estate. And so ultimately, B and I rented the most beautiful thatched cottage on the Eastnor Castle estate. It was just lovely. And so that was such a beautiful, gentle place to be. There were banks of snowdrops and then daffodils. And it was really healing. And just a lovely, lovely place to be. And it was there that I started to think about what can I do ultimately to help others. I hadn't published my first book yet. That came in 2017. And that was stories of women just like us, not celebrities or well-known women, but I wanted what I called ordinary but everyday women who have had to face adversity or challenge or even trauma. And it had been one of my projects during my photography degree in 2004. And in fact, that I did that project, and then a week later discovered that my husband, the father of my children, was having an affair and had been for the previous 6 months. And we'd been in relate counselling for nearly a year. So that was another traumatic incident. But moving on, it took me 12 years. In 2017, I published that first book of stories. And I wanted that book, the women who shared their stories, and there's 2 books now, they've shared their stories in order to help others. And I chose the title Women of Spirit because spirit is the vital animating essence of a person. And that's what I try to capture in a portrait or a photograph. And for the women themselves, they found writing their story incredibly cathartic. So I know people use journaling as therapy. I would always say, if you've been through anything, write your story so far. And you know, one woman said it was a difficult birth, but she wasn't, you know, she was glad she did it. One woman said, I can't share this. She'd been very badly abused. I can't share it yet. It's my story and I need to own it for a while. One woman said, how come I feel so vulnerable and yet so empowered at the same time? So very, very powerful. So that was the sort of the beginning of the evolving from being a photographer, loving people, helping them feel comfortable and confident in front of the camera. And from weddings, I then did boudoir or female empowerment photography. Some said it changed their lives. Into finally, couldn't do photography through lockdown. Excuse me, Deborah, I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
And so I became, before I got COVID and nearly died in hospital of it, I did first half of a mental toughness assessment course. And then I finished it during the time I had long COVID. I wanted something more tangible, because I was starting to help people with their difficulties and I didn't have a qualification. So I'm more of a mentor, but becoming a licensed mental toughness assessor meant that I then wrote, it took me 6 months to write this full day's workshop. Now, Deborah, the first half is all about the self. It's all about, you know, self-worth, self-belief, or everything to do with the self, because we need to go there first. And it's all about that. And then the second half is how to develop your mental toughness. And some people struggle with the phrase mental toughness because it is quite a sort of a hard phrase, but they talk about it a lot in sport. And if we look at toughness, meaning resilience plus positivity, that would be mental toughness. And in a way, that's me. So it was a perfect thing to do. So now I help divorcees who are going through a really difficult divorce, because I've done it 3 times. And I just love to help people. And I also now know that it's okay to be rewarded for that. So it's a business, not a charity. Although I'm going to be getting involved and I'd support charities of abused women, because I've had every kind of domestic abuse during my life, and no more. Because what I believe in women until they can believe in themselves, because they need somebody. If they don't have a great support network, if they don't have a few good friends who will shore them up whilst they go, who've got the time and can be bothered to do that. And I say, I will help you step into your inner power so that and stay there, so you never feel powerless again, because feeling powerless is an awful place to be.
Yes, it is an awful place to be. And I think that what you're doing is you're shining a light. Sometimes to shine that light in the dark recesses of our minds, of our beings, can be very difficult. And people, I know from being an abuse and trauma survivor myself, because I come from the basis of experience with a myriad of bad relationships,
Yes.
when it comes to an intimate relationship.
Yes.
My belief is that when we are going through our formative years, we become hardwired in a certain way.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes one has to look at that hardwiring and go, is that suiting my life? Is that making me happy? Am I bringing joy into the world? And if the answer is no, then there's some work to do. And like anything, when we work and exercise a muscle in the gym or what have you, or even mentally or in our heart space, it can be tough because that muscle isn't used to that kind of exercise. And what you're saying is very interesting, that you're there to be the wind beneath people's wings, to be that support, that platform, because it's very important. From that perspective, I believe that the platform has to be strong and has to be healthy, but you're taking away another platform which isn't serving, but it has to replace with another one. And going through that period of transformation, of change, is one which, with the benefit of hindsight, can be the best thing that ever happened. But when it's being gone through, it can be extraordinarily challenging, and old limiting beliefs and thought processes can sometimes draw us back into those bad ways, those negative ways of thinking, or being with those people again that do not serve us. And it's a journey. And I think that as anybody, women, men, if we can give ourselves the compassion and the praise that we deserve. Yes.
And I think the thing is, about the mental toughness, it doesn't make you a hard person. You're not growing, becoming hard and tough. Not at all. You remain who you are, but you build your strength. And certainly, Deborah, lived experiences are hugely important. And I don't regret them, because they made me who I am, partly who I am. They were experiences that have enabled me to now help other people, not even have to go there. I mean, I'm going to start working with younger, disadvantaged people, because I would love to think that we can help people not even get into a place where they get into those kind of relationships. So build that strength before the chances are that they may fall prey, because you are prey to some of these people. I can remember many, many years ago saying to my best friend and her husband, why do I pick these men? And he actually said to me, Susie, you don't pick them, they pick you, because of course you're attracting them by what you're giving out. And so that's the reason for learning your strength, learning your power, and standing in your power, which is a good thing. And absolutely staying strong and true to yourself, and quickly, if it doesn't serve you, make that shift. And I think I said to you, Deborah, when we spoke a while ago, that there's a lovely phrase, a rising tide raises all ships. And I'm loving being part of that rising tide, because it gives meaning. What I'm doing now gives meaning to what I went through in the past, because I'm using it. I've learned from it and thinking, okay, how can I help others with this? And that also is a great thing to do, because the serotonin levels of the giver are, funnily enough, always higher than the receiver. So it makes us feel good to do things for other people. So actually, if you're feeling a bit down or depressed, go and do something for someone else. It'll make you feel good.
Oh,
The basis of
absolutely.
humanity is that we actually love to help people, or most of us do anyway.
Well, this is very important about the giving to others. One of the things I'd like to very briefly touch upon, and it can be a very, very difficult subject, and it's taken me a long time, most of my life, is that of forgiveness.
Mm. Mm.
Because the parents that I was born to, there's no exam for parenting. In my reflection, would they have made, the choices that they made to have children are questionable. However, I wouldn't have been here in this
Mm.
wonderful state if I hadn't have been the child of
Mm.
my parents.
Mm.
How do you come across somebody that suffered abuse, trauma, through no fault necessarily of themselves actively? We can draw things to us, but it's not our active intention to go down that road.
Mm.
The
Mm.
perpetrators of this, what is your view around the forgiveness and getting on with our lives and helping to frame that part of our lives as something which doesn't cause us pain and anguish when we look back on it?
Mm. I don't do an organized religion. I thank the universe multiple times a day, because it's the energy, and we are all energy. I love what Oprah said about forgiveness. So particularly it would be the father of my children, who did unforgivable things, both to me and to my girls. And so when you see them as unforgivable, why would I want to forgive that person, especially when it's to your children? So my way of the act of, or it's not one act either, it's a process of forgiveness, is to, because I think Oprah says you actually forgive for yourself, you don't forgive for the other person, because they're not going to change unless they choose to. And unfortunately, that choice hasn't been made all these years later. So I decided that I didn't really badmouth unless they came to me for help. So it's just I put them meant visually, on a disc, on a little disc. They're sitting cross-legged like a little genie on a disc, and I spin that disc into space. So they're very, 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 very far away. And then I just go poof, and I explode it. So it's a visualization to enable me to delete, if you like. You can do that as often as you like. But also, just like Jacinta Ardern, the New Zealand president, said at the time of that awful mass shooting, we will not mention his name. We will not give him the fame. I've unpacked the suitcase. I haven't just shoved it in a dark cupboard. I don't have any feelings for them. I feel nothing, because I've got on with my life. I'm too busy building the new and doing the positive things and being grateful for the things I have. Gratitude is one of the most important emotions you can feel, as long as you feel it genuinely. Even over the fact that we have running water and a flushing loo. So they then fade into the past, and you don't need to think about them anymore. Now, that takes a certain amount of strength and mindset to do that. Some people need therapy and a lot of help to get there, but there are ways. So I didn't use the actual word forgiveness. I just got on with my life, didn't, and so that all faded into the distance. And in fact, I was awarded Resilience Warrior by a group a couple of years ago. And the founder of the group said, never underestimate how your resilience inspires others. And I think rather than think about that person who did you wrong, work on you, work on yourself, build yourself up, and just put them into the distance. Why would I forgive somebody who did such awful things to my children? But I'd help, but my girls and I we have a wonderful relationship, and it's fun and it's funny and it's joyful, and so that's the thing to focus on. They were 10 and 14 when I found out about the affair, and he abandoned basically his children. And they're 30 and 30, or nearly 30 and 33 now. And so, life isn't sometimes easy, but that's better for the children. Gosh, I got it wrong a number of times. I wasn't perfect. And I think that's the other thing somebody said to me about my mother. She did the best she could. And I think we do the best we can with what we have at the time. And our parents did that. And actually, sometimes, no, it wasn't anywhere near good enough, but it was what they had and what they did. And then when we become adults, just like Will Smith said a long time ago in a little FaceTime video in his jolly way, stop blaming your parents. Now, you've got to unpack it and unpeel it and go through those to take the pain and resolve all of that of what happened when you were a child. But when you become an adult, you do have a choice, and you can make that choice again to move forward, and realize that they're only human too. And that takes an element of forgiveness. My best time of forgiving, if you don't mind the inverted commas, with my mother was when she was dying of cancer in her early 80s, nearly 4 years ago. And she'd been a tricksy mother, very controlling, very acid drops, oof, and difficult. And so, but I left Cheltenham, I left my flat and went down to literally sleep right next to her, to look after her for the 3 months that and it was a privilege. It was the most healing experience, because she's dying. What else could I give her than unconditional love? And she sucked it up like a sponge, and she became such a lovely person. She was grateful. She was happy. She said, you could say, I'm having a good death. And it was such a healing experience. So that was another thing. If you find yourself in a position where you can do it, I would say, go do it. Just give, because also it's healing and you receive. So I think possibly that for me, was the ultimate forgiveness. Although I don't think we ever spoke that word. It was, you can do it through action.
Yes, thank you, Susie.
I'm so glad I had that before, because years ago, not that many years ago, but there was a thought, do I have to wait until she's dead before I have to feel free? And that's an awful thing. And I know that's not uncommon. So doing that was one of the best things I've ever done. And very forgiving, but I didn't say, oh, I'm going to go and forgive her. And, it was genuine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this will resonate with a lot of people, because people aren't perfect. I know I'm not perfect.
No.
And,
especially as parents, Deborah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have children. I made a decision that the bad blood, what have you, in my family would stop with me. And that's what I did. And I'm very happy with that decision because that's a decision I've made, and
Yes.
that's
And
it.
you had a choice. It's all about choice.
Absolutely. But when my father died, it was a case of I'll be free when he's dead.
Yes.
And
Yes.
ultimately, I
Yes.
was free.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then when
I
my
can
mother
understand.
passed away, absolutely. But when my mother passed away, I spent 10 years of my life caring for her, which was incredibly
Gosh.
challenging.
Yes, I bet.
Um, you know, for me, it was a level of understanding with a knowledge of, I'm using the word gnosis here. It almost is knowledge with wisdom, knowledge with application that my mother must have, not that she talked about it much, but must have had a very traumatic upbringing. Not that it made it right,
No,
not that
no,
it made anything that she did the right
no,
choice from that
no,
point of view, but
no.
just through the level of understanding it,
Mm, absolutely.
massive difference.
I knew, Simon, because my grandparents were still alive, and my grandmother, and I knew why my mother was as she was, because she'd never been given love or approval by her mother. And there was an empty space inside her that she filled with material things, and it doesn't fill that void. And I once said to my father, we women laugh about retail therapy, but with mummy, it really is therapy.
Mm.
I learned this beautiful phrase at an event the other day, and I just want to, maybe, because I know where time is running on. This is a quote, and I'm not quite sure where from, but I will find it. A father's love teaches a girl how a man's love should feel. So if you don't have a father who teaches you that, it's unfortunate, and you haven't had a good start in your life. So if there are any men listening, please, just be as good as you can possibly be. And women, parenting isn't easy, but we can change things, because I also believe that learning is for life. It's never, ever too late.
And it's the application of that learning, isn't it?
Oh,
Because as
yeah.
long as we don't keep it for ourselves and we spread it, it's like money. As long as
Mm.
we don't hoard it and we give it as energy out to the universe and out to
Yes,
people, that's
yes,
what we're
yes,
about.
yes.
Yes. Thank
Yeah.
you, Susie.
Oh,
Sorry, I could talk to you all day, and I'm sure
I
you.
know, I know. And you, Deborah, thank you so much for giving me. I'm an open book, heart on my sleeve. And it's the vulnerability of sharing. But as Brené Brown had said, without vulnerability, there is no courage. And I feel but my courage comes from wanting to help people just like you. And so I thank you for what you're doing. And thank you for having me on here today. I've really loved
It's
our
been
conversation.
a
Thank you.
privilege. Now, we will have your details in the show notes, so your book and your work and your details, etc. But just very quickly, is there, if somebody wants to be in touch, how can they be in touch with you?
LinkedIn, Susie Mackie on LinkedIn, Susie Mackie Advocate for Women. And also I have a website, susiemackielife.com. So and then the socials are all on there. So it's probably the two best places to find me.
Lovely. Thank you, Susie. It's been an utter privilege.
My
And
pleasure.
I think, let's just keep on doing the best we can, being the compassionate, wonderful, loving people. And this is for everybody. We're all good. We're all good. We're just all trying to get there. So thanks,
Yeah.
everybody. It's been an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure to be there today. And we'll speak to you very soon. Okay. Bye-bye now. Bye.
Bye.